Thank you for having me on your platform. I truly appreciate that. I think it's very noble and brave because someone who speaks as I speak, I don't get a lot of opportunities to speak, right? And so I appreciate that opportunity. Ubuntu, I am because you are. But I would say one of the first ways that I came through consciousness is through an African-American brother who introduced me to the Willie Lynch story. And from then it was studying African-American history, which brought me to Haitian history. Studying people like Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and Neely Fuller would necessarily be my woke story. If you want to call it a story, I call it a journey. I didn't grow up necessarily having a great relationship with my father. And so I knew more about my mother's culture than my father's culture. My grandfather is from Benin, and he went to Haiti and had my father. So I never really identified as being African, right? Because again, I was raised with my mother. But one day it hit me that I was African. It was like an epiphany. You know, I'm that kid in Jamaica. I'm that kid in Haiti. I'm that kid in Ghana. To give an analogy, it was kind of like when Adam and Eve ate the apple and their eyes were open, right? That was kind of how it felt like. I began to see things differently, speak differently, and interact with people differently. It also has a dark side to it. You begin to lose friends, right? You begin to see how poisonous people can actually be, black or white, how indoctrinated we can be. It's a journey, one that's gonna have a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. When you sleep at night, you know that you have a greater purpose in this world. You are really gonna feel a certain type of way about yourself, and not in a narcissistic way, but in a way where there's a level of pride where can't nobody tell you who you are as an African. You know what you come from. I would say to the youth who are taking the path of consciousness or who want to become conscious, understand it's a greater purpose. The greater purpose is to one day leave a legacy for your children and also honor our ancestors in doing so. So you can't do that by being a copycat. You can't do that by being scared of being unapologetic black. You have to go against the grain. That's what creates leaders, going against the grain. And so I would tell any young African who's trying to go down that path to stay put, right? Or keep going down that path. Because a lot of times we find it to be lonely, right? But then you find communities like this, like Al Kabulon Educational Center, or you find communities like for a long time, I felt like I was alone. Like I was the only one really caring about our people and, you know, getting out on the streets and things like that. You will find your community, you will find your place. Consciousness is so, I don't want to say universal, but so different to each person. Like someone can sit down and watch a YouTube video and become conscious or have an idea of what consciousness is. Some people could read a book. Or some people need examples like Malcolm X to see what manhood and consciousness looks like. And so I really don't like to subscribe books to people or videos. I like just fall into your level of consciousness where you fall in at. Because when you do that, then it becomes, well, I read this book and I still feel the same. If it's through YouTube videos, then have at it. Through books, have at it. The scholar that has impacted my life and awakened me the most has to be Dr. Amos Wilson. Bar none. He took the history, took the psychology, and intertwined it together. And so Dr. Amos Wilson would have to be the scholar that I credit for taking me over the threshold of consciousness and having me understand how this is a political game and the psychological nuance behind it and the historical nuance behind it. So it would have to be Dr. Amos Wilson. And then after that, I would have to say Khalid Muhammad, as far as lectures on YouTube, how unapologetic he was. Yeah, it would have to be those two.
If someone broke into your home, Mr. Donahue, and actually bum-rushed your home, and Black Boots stomped your door down, and came in and robbed and raped everyone in the household, and was able to take the wealth of your home and parlay it into an empire. This is an invader. This is an intruder. This is a murderer. This is a burglar. This is a criminal. So you have no responsibility to share your home with them after they broke in and committed the crimes that they did.
Well, the first time watching it, I hadn't met or haven't been introduced to Dr. Amos Wilson's information. And so this was early on in my consciousness where I believed that pro-black doesn't mean anti-white, right? So I was at that stage because it is stages to consciousness, to waking up, the same way you wake up out of your sleep. I mean, you just don't jump up out of bed and wake up. And so I was at a stage where when I seen the video, I was like, why is he so angry? Because I didn't understand it. I was like, this brother is going off. He is, you know, being so mean and things like that. But as I gradually woke up, I said, oh yeah, that's right. Give it to him, because I understood more. And so when I first seen it, I was thrown back. You know, angry black man. That's how we're trained to look at ourselves. Oh, angry black man, he's mad. You know, but then when my pro-black just became pro-black, I was like, yeah, he was right the whole time. We are all affected by the situation. It's not just me. It's something that we all should be involved in, because we're being attacked in different levels. We all can be involved in a form of changing our economical situation, our political situation, our dating situation, just changing the way people think. Because if we change the way we think, then we change the way we behave. And when we change the way we behave, we would change the system of white supremacy, or topple the system of white supremacy. Sadly, in the system of white supremacy, it's based off of rules and exceptions. And so everybody won't make it. And that's one of the problems that we run into in the community, is that we think that we can save everybody. But some people are so far gone in this system that there's no helping them. And so they will fall by the wayside. Europeans, if you look at, let's say, for example, the American Revolution, they didn't try to save all white people. It was 3/4 of the American population that actually fought in the American Revolution. And one thing we have to understand is power is respected by powerless people. So if the Africans who are African-centered truly gain a social power, then that means that everybody else has to fall in line. All the other Africans have to fall in line, because we're now in control of our destiny, in control of our definitions and our society. So it's a sad reality, but it's the truth. One of the first things that Africans need to do globally to advance is kill the cracker inside of them.
What does that mean? That
means you must kill any idea of whiteness, anything that portrays or upholds the system of white supremacy. We can't come together if you still have a little cracker in you, if you have a white man inside of you, right? Because then it's going to become envious. It's going to become jealous, right? Africans didn't have a system of capitalism. Like, some of these things that we uphold, right, are what's keeping us held back. And so you have to literally reverse everything in your thinking and kill the cracker inside of you and say, I don't want that, because that's not the best thing for my people. And so reject anything European. And if you do use something European, use it in your best interest. One of the things that I use, for an example, is, because, you know, people say things like, oh, well, you know, you be on Facebook, you be on Instagram, and, you know, this and that, and you got to use the white man's phone. The difference between an African and a nigger is, if you give them something, you'll see the outcome of what you give them and how it works. If you give an African a car, he's going to use that car to go plant food and go give it out to the community. You give a nigger a car, he's going to go do a drive-by. You give an African a phone and a social media platform, and he's going to provide positive information and education. You give a nigger a phone, he's going to be up there twerking and throwing money or doing something derogatory. And so we got to kill that cracker inside of us. And anything we do have in the system, use it to better ourselves. No, I'm not advocating for all of us to get on planes and boats and go back to Africa, because I believe that Africa is anywhere that Africans are. And so we must create Africa anywhere that we are at, right? So Europeans, we must essentially become the new colonizers and the new rulers and the new definers of our reality. So we don't all have to go back to Africa, because then that leaves us open to attack. We should be strong men on each continent, each Caribbean setting that we live in. Simply put, defining our own reality. Whatever fits African people, whatever we can be self-sustaining in doing, being independent in ourselves, any way possible that we can be self-sufficient, is my definition for the future. Africa has never been monolithic. Africa has never been one set culture. So it could be different ways you can practice being African. You can practice being African economically. You can practice being African socially, right? So it depends on how you carry yourself. But for me, personally, just loving other Africans and being about anything African or black. And that's what it looks for me day to day. I think, as Garvey says, we have to remove the titles that Europeans put on us. Congo didn't exist a few years ago. Well, not a few years ago, a couple of years ago. Nigeria didn't exist. We hold these national boundaries up, right? And these were boundaries that were created by the European to create confusion, to create separation. Not only that, when you go deeper into the culture, we have ethnicity differences, right? And so we can't work together if someone's not going to talk to you because you're a Yoruba or because you're Igbo. So we have to, what Garvey says, identify as African and make all those other things subcultures. And when we begin to move as a people, because the systems are ran by the people, whether we know it or not, right? It's ran because we go along with the system. If we no longer go along with the system has to cater to us. There's a meme on Instagram where these black guys are laying down, and on the top of them is a checkerboard. And then the caption says, all they have to do is stand up and the game is over. And so that's essentially what we have to do. Enough of us have to stand up, enough of us, and be unapologetic about it. These systems are ran through media, and media is unfortunately Facebook and Instagram. And so Europeans, Yorugu, understand that they must control the narrative that's being shared. And when someone is bringing an unapologetic African perspective, you end up in Facebook jail, Instagram will delete it. I'm probably on my 5th or 6th social media account. So it happens. I'm not there for the people who know the information. I'm there for those who don't. So when I'm up there recreating these pages, it's not for the people who already know it, it's for the people who don't. And they're unfortunately on those platforms. So I need those too. I need to be as the biblical Jesus Christ. I'm fishing for men and women. And so that's why I'm on these white platforms so hard. I wasn't born a Christian. I was born an African, so I'm just an African. I wasn't born a Muslim. People convert to these religions. So the way I was born is what I am now. I'm just an African. Literally, I'm just spiritual. I believe in my ancestors. I believe in nature. I'm just a spiritual being. I don't like to classify my religion because then people have a mimetic ideation of what you are and who you are, because all these things are symbols, right? So I don't like to give a deep definition of my religion. I'm just a spiritual person. The way I was born is the way I am now. I just released a children's book dedicated to my daughters called Haiti and Her Friends. It's a history book for African children, specifically Haitian children, but it's for African children in general. Designed to create self-esteem and awareness in African children. The philosophy of the book to me is Ubuntu. I am because you are, and that's what Haitian culture embodies. Haiti gets a bad rap, and people don't understand why Haiti gets a bad rap compared to other Caribbean islands or etc. There is a concerted effort to destroy Haitian culture and everything it stands for. And so I just want to shed light on that and have people share that information, because a lot of our families came to the United States not knowing a lot of this information. And so now we have a generation of Haitians growing up not knowing their true history and what they contributed to the world. After that, I should be working on a memoir. From Malcolm X to me, something I've been working on for a while, but I just haven't buckled it down. It's basically going to break down the system of white supremacy, how a system created Detroit Red, who later became Malcolm X, and that same system exists, which created me when I was in the streets and now to who I am today. And so it's a system that keeps creating us, revolutionaries. And on the onset, it creates people who are not revolutionary. That's my main thesis behind the book, that Malcolm was in the street, went by the name Detroit Red, and he was given a certain information that enlightened him and changed his whole perspective on the world. Sort of the same situation myself. I was in the streets and I was given a certain level of information that changed my perspective. There aren't too many Malcolms out here. There aren't too many black men who can speak unapologetic on any level, speaking to white people. So early on when I was introduced to Malcolm, he was, the greatest to me, just because he can speak and not even blink. That's real black masculinity to me. I believe myself to be very disciplined and very, militarized in the sense, in my thinking and in my actions, because that's what manhood is supposed to reflect. If you want to classify yourself as a man, you have to be militant and fight against people deciding to destroy your community, right? And that's what Malcolm represents to me. So I believe that I share those characteristics. I can't say I walk in Malcolm's shoes, but I believe that I share those militaristic and mindsets that Malcolm once possessed. As Dr. Amos Wilson says, the things that's supposed to, better you, you hate them. And the things that worsen you, you love them. And so when I come to parents and I say, hey, give me your kids, I'm going to teach them manhood and I'm going to teach them this. It's like, nah, I'm not really into that. But if it's anything destructive, they'll hand their kids right over. And so it's been hard kind of galvanizing the community to get behind some of these ideas because we're so self-hating. But eventually, I'm trying to get in the community and do as much as I can to organize people. So eventually it'll come along. Discipline is, by definition, doing what you don't want to do, but it needs to be done. And African people, contrary to most people believe, have discipline, right? We discipline and train our children in basketball. We get a football in their hand and we train them all the way up into college. So we're disciplined. We're just disciplined in the wrong areas. We've been at strip club every night, but we don't want to get that book and read every night. So we just have to change our formation of what we're disciplined in. We're very disciplined people. We in church every Sunday. You know, might not be the most holiest people, but we in church every Sunday. So we just have to change what we're disciplined in doing.